When you see an Apostle Arome speaking against this matter, it's not for hate, it's because of the information in our hands. Evidence. So when we stand like this to speak, it's not because we hate the body. Oh, body Nigeria, hear me. You are being rigged with prophetic pitfalls.
So, Reverend Austin just released a defense for Apostle Arome Osayi and various attacks on Arome Osayi's ministry and his remnant Christian network. But after watching it for about 3 times, there are 7 massive questions he completely avoided. Today, on Blackish Gold Original, Africa's #1 church accountability channel, we go back to look at the truth Reverend Austin is not completely telling you. Let's dive deep immediately.
When you see an Apostle Arome speaking against this matter, it's not for hate, it's because of the information in our hands. Evidence. As I'm here, I have seen the private part of a minister of this country that was sent to me. The lady captured it.
Number 1, what exactly is the evidence Reverend Austin is referring to? In the viral sermon, Reverend Austin repeatedly emphasizes evidence, even claiming he has seen sensitive material involving ministers. He presents this as justification for why certain leaders speak boldly against misconduct in ministry circles. However, he does not clearly define what qualifies as evidence, whether it is verified legal proof, private confessions, screenshots, or second-hand accounts. In real-world legal and institutional settings, evidence must meet standards of verification before being used to accuse or defend anyone publicly. Without this clarity, audiences are left to interpret evidence emotionally rather than factually. This creates tension between spiritual authority and public accountability, especially in an era where social media amplifies unverified claims quickly. If evidence exists but remains undefined, how should believers distinguish between truth, allegation, and interpretation? But if evidence is so critical, who determines when it is strong enough to act upon? Number 2, who decides when evidence becomes actionable in the church? Reverend Austin argues that evidence terminates argument, suggesting that once evidence exists, debate should end. But he does not explain who evaluates that evidence or how it is processed within church structures. This raises a deeper governance question. Is accountability centralized in individual spiritual leaders, or is there a formal system of review? In secular systems like courts or corporate boards, evidence goes through structured review before consequences. In contrast, many church environments operate on trust-based authority, where senior ministers interpret matters internally. This creates concerns about bias, especially when allegations involve respected figures. Real-life examples, including global church scandals, have shown that internal-only investigations sometimes fail to protect victims or ensure fairness. So, if evidence exists but is privately held, what prevents selective interpretation? And if interpretation can be selective, what happens to the people who are harmed?
I've conducted deliverance on a girl in this country that was harassed from the age of 13 until she was 26. And she says to me, Reverend Austin, wait, let me show you something. This man is about to give word of knowledge.
Number 3, who protects victims when spiritual authority is involved? One of the most striking moments in the sermon is Reverend Austin's reference to a woman allegedly abused from age 13 to 26, where he described extended deliverance and manipulation. This highlights a painful reality. Victims within spiritual environments often struggle to speak out due to fear, shame, or reverence for authority. In real-world cases globally, including high-profile church and institutional scandals, delayed reporting often leads to prolonged harm. The imbalance of power makes it difficult for victims to be believed, especially when the accused holds spiritual influence. Reverend Austin's narrative exposes the emotional weight of such cases, but it also raises the question of prevention.
how systems could identify and stop abuse earlier instead of responding after damage is done. If victims depend on internal ministry intervention, what safeguards exist before abuse escalates? And if safeguards fail, can spiritual gifting still be trusted? Number 4. Can spiritual gifting exist alongside moral failure? Throughout the sermon, Reverend Austin strongly warns about ministers involved in sexual immorality, greed, and double lives while still operating in public ministry. He argues that spiritual power does not automatically equal moral purity. This creates a difficult theological and practical tension within Christianity. Historically, many religious and even secular leadership scandals show individuals who performed effectively in public roles while living in private contradiction. This duality is what makes cases of moral failure so shocking when exposed. The issue is not just theological, it is psychological and institutional. People naturally assume that visible spiritual performance reflects internal integrity, but reality often proves more complex. If gifting can operate independently of character, how should followers evaluate spiritual authority? And if character is the real foundation, who ensures it is maintained?
2 weeks ago, I got a report. A young lady sent me screenshots of one of our sons in Lagos. And he was telling her, he said, I need to inquire from the Lord on your behalf. But you need to give seed. He said the seed is what will pave the atmosphere for inquiry. I'm not kidding. He's my son. I will not deny him. When I saw it, I almost fell on the floor. My own son, RC in Lagos, striving towards the apostolic rebel. Oh my God. So I sat him down and said, where did you learn this thing? No, I started like Nathan. I said, if somebody wants to prophesy and he requested for resources, he said, no, Papa, I just brought the screenshots.
Number 5. Who holds spiritual leaders accountable? Reverend Austin references confronting his own spiritual son over unethical financial practices tied to prophecy. This reveals that accountability sometimes exists within mentorship structures. However, it also raises a critical question. What happens when misconduct occurs outside personal relationships or when senior leaders themselves are involved? In corporate governance, accountability is distributed through boards, audits.
In many church systems, however, accountability is often relational rather than institutional. This can create blind spots when loyalty or reverence prevents confrontation. Real-world religious reforms in various countries have shown that external accountability systems often emerge only after public scandals. So the question becomes, is internal correction enough or is external oversight necessary? And if accountability systems are weak, what happens to truth when money enters the equation? Number 6. How does greed influence spiritual authority? A major theme in Reverend Austin's sermon is the danger of greed in ministry, referencing Balaam as an example of corrupted spiritual intent. He also criticizes ministers who attach financial demands to prophecy or spiritual direction. The concern is that financial incentives can distort spiritual judgment. In real life, financial influence has been a recurring issue in many religious and organizational scandals worldwide, where donations, offerings, or seeds become linked to spiritual outcomes. This creates ethical tension between faith-based giving. When money becomes part of spiritual decision-making, the line between ministry and commerce can blur. Reverend Austin warns that greed can eventually silence truth as individuals begin to protect income streams rather than integrity. If financial pressure can influence spiritual speech, how independent is prophetic authority really? And if speech can be influenced,
what happens to trust in leadership?
Number 7. Can trust be rebuilt once credibility is damaged? By the end of the sermon, Reverend Austin emphasizes that character is more important than gifting and that long-term ministry requires integrity over visibility. This points directly to the issue of trust, arguably the most fragile element in spiritual leadership today. In real-world contexts, trust once broken is difficult to restore without transparency, accountability, and consistent behavior over time. Institutions that have faced repeated scandals often undergo structural reforms to regain credibility. So, that's the end of today's episode on Blackish Gold Originals, Africa's #1 church accountability channel on YouTube. In the next episode, showing on your screen now, we uncover even more shocking stories happening in the African Christian space. Click and watch it now. Remember, we don't attack faith, we ask questions, seek clarity, and hold narratives to scrutiny in a world full of noise and influence. See you in our next video.